She never saw it coming. How could she? One moment, Keshia Knight Pulliam was nestled into the fabric of a quiet morning, legs folded on her velvet couch, a mug of lemon tea steaming in her hand, scrolling through reels of nostalgia and news like any other Tuesday. And the next, her entire world collapsed under the weight of a single notification. A headline, unassuming in size, catastrophic in content: Malcolm-Jamal Warner dies at 52, found unresponsive in his private retreat in Piac, Costa Rica. No warning, no final call, no goodbye, just gone. The silence in the room fractured under the sound of her phone hitting the floor. She stumbled backward, knees buckling, back arching in slow-motion agony, and crumpled to the ground as if the universe had personally reached into her chest and crushed her lungs. It wasn't a scream that escaped her. It was a wail, guttural, primal, the kind of grief that lives in the marrow of your bones and tears through your throat like broken glass. "This can't be real," she whispered again and again, voice shaking like a fault line. "That's my Theo. That's my brother." And in that moment, the weight of every laugh they ever shared on the set of The Cosby Show, every hug on and off screen, every inside joke, late-night call and protective glance slammed into her like a freight train, ripping the stitches of her memory apart. The grief wasn't performative. It wasn't for Instagram. It was the kind of morning that made neighbors call 911. Security footage captured the collapse, her frame trembling, her sobs echoing like a spiritual siren of loss. The footage leaked within hours. Millions watched in stunned silence as she mouthed, "If I knew that was our last hug, I never would have let go." And with those 12 words, the internet broke. She was rushed to the hospital in a trauma alert, not for broken bones or cardiac arrest, but for emotional devastation so severe that her body shut down. Doctors diagnosed it as a psychosomatic collapse. Her vitals tanked, her blood pressure bottomed out, and they had to sedate her just to get her to breathe. She didn't speak, she didn't eat, she didn't move. And while the rest of the world was just catching up, while social media scrambled to confirm TMZ's breaking report, and while fans posted throwback clips of Theo Huxtable dancing in oversized sweaters, Keshia's world had already imploded. The cast, who grew up together on America's most beloved sitcom, issued statements laced with devastation. Lisa Bonet posted a black square captioned only with, "This hurts deeply," while Tempest Bledsoe shared a 1990s cast photo with the haunting line, "We didn't know those would be the good old days." But it was Keshia who bore the earthquake in her chest. Her team cancelled all appearances. Her podcast feed went dark. Her phone gathered dust while voicemails piled up like unanswered prayers. And then, as if fate wasn't already cruel, TMZ leaked a private voicemail, Keshia's voice, tender and hopeful, left just 2 weeks before Malcolm's death. "Hey Mel, just thinking about you. Been a minute since we caught up. Let's do dinner soon, okay? Miss your energy, miss your laugh. Call me." But he never called back, and that broke her all over again. At the funeral, she arrived in all black, hidden behind dark glasses and a grief too large for her petite frame. When they lowered the casket, she let out a scream that stopped even the priest mid-prayer. She collapsed right there at the grave, hands gripping the coffin like it was the last tether to a life that had now become legend. Cameras rolled. The footage spread like fire to dry brush. People didn't just watch. They mourned with her. They cried like they had lost family. Because in many ways they had. The Cosby Show wasn't just television. It was a cornerstone of black excellence, of wholesome family dreams, of sitcom therapy for an entire generation. And Malcolm, Theo, was its beating heart. Keshia stayed silent through it all. Not a tweet, not a post, nothing. Until one blurry Instagram photo of the two of them hugging backstage surfaced on her feed, captioned with just 10 words. "You weren't just my TV brother, you were my real one." The world didn't need a press release. That caption gutted everyone. The grief wasn't symbolic, it was biblical. But then came the twist that sent the internet into a tailspin. 2 days after the funeral, a voicemail surfaced. Malcolm's voice, calm, tired, reflective, allegedly recorded hours before his death. "Tell Keshia, I never stopped loving her. I wish we had one more day." And with that, the narrative shattered and reformed. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a love story left unread. Missed chances, silent longing, the kind of quiet heartbreak that spans decades. Just Malcolm and Keshia trended worldwide within minutes. Fans created tributes set to Boys 2 Men and Sadie. TikToks layered Cosby Show clips over slow-motion footage of real-life red carpets. But even as Keshia Knight Pulliam faded back into shadows, her foundation roaring louder than ever, her social feeds abandoned, her smile permanently etched with a sorrow only those who loved someone too deeply could recognize, the world refused to forget, refused to move on, refused to let Malcolm-Jamal Warner become another cautionary tale swallowed by Hollywood's amnesia machine. And just when the headlines began quieting, just when the docuseries proposals started sounding like vultures clawing at the carcass of truth, the world cracked open again, this time from a leak not orchestrated by any journalist, activist, or surviving cast member, but from a hacked studio vault itself. A mysterious file labeled MJW The Final Cut, posted by an anonymous user who simply wrote, "He finished it. You buried it. Now we watch." And in a matter of hours, it spread like wildfire, a grainy 94-minute documentary so raw, so searing, that it made surviving awe. Kelly looked like a warm-up act, and there he was, Malcolm himself, narrating between clips filmed on handheld cameras, burner iPhones, security footage from casting rooms, and even secret mic'd conversations at studio parties, weaving together a story not just of abuse and systemic silencing, but of how power weaponizes nostalgia, how entire empires are built on the backs of violated children, muted actors, and traumatized legends who aged into obscurity while the architects of their pain collected syndication checks. And at the center of this living funeral was not just Malcolm's own story, but Keshia's too. The little girl who giggled through our screens while fighting off demons behind them, whose parents were threatened with lawsuits, whose cries were edited out of bloopers, whose innocence became the currency exchanged in dark rooms where ratings mattered more than lives. And as the film played, Malcolm's voice cracked when he said, "She didn't deserve the silence we gave her. Not me. Not any of us. This is my apology." And that single line detonated across the industry like a bomb, because suddenly there was no more plausible deniability, no more "we didn't know," no more fake compassion in carefully worded PR statements, because Malcolm hadn't just exposed the abuse, he had given it a face, a time code, a soundtrack of muffled screams beneath studio applause. And as the Academy scrambled to distance itself, as PR firms ducked and weaved and released statements like flares in a war zone, one thing became devastatingly clear. America's favorite son had died not by accident, not by natural cause, but by design. Chased, hunted, silenced until his organs gave up before his soul ever did. And the coroner's report, once dismissed as inconclusive cardiac arrest, was quietly reclassified as consistent with long-term stress-induced cardiovascular deterioration, a phrase Keshia herself quoted at a press conference, her voice trembling, eyes red, saying, "He didn't have a heart attack. They attacked his heart every day until it stopped." And in that room full of cameras, no one breathed. The world changed overnight. Studios pulled old box sets off shelves. Syndication rights were suspended. Schools updated their curricula to include case studies on entertainment trauma. Talk shows held awkward tributes. Actors previously blacklisted for speaking truth were re-invited into the fold. But not all accepted. Because this wasn't just an industry cleanup. It was a reckoning, one that bled into boardrooms, into churches, into living rooms where families sat their children down to explain how the people who made them laugh also broke real people into pieces for ratings. And in the center of that global unlearning was Keshia Knight Pulliam, no longer the cute face of a perfect sitcom daughter, no longer the silent shadow in oversized sunglasses, but a survivor turned revolutionary who no longer apologized for her rage, no longer smiled to make others comfortable, no longer downplayed her own pain to elevate someone else's comfort. And when asked by 60 Minutes what she felt watching Malcolm's final documentary, her answer was so devastatingly human that it became the most replayed clip of the year. "I felt like I was watching a man crawl out of his own coffin to pull me out of mine. But trauma, even when lit up by justice, still leaves behind embers. And those embers flared every anniversary, Every fan-made memorial, every time an old clip of Theo and Rudy resurfaced online with captions like, "This aged differently." And though Keshia tried to move forward, launching legislation nicknamed the Theo Bill, aimed at protecting minors on sets from coercion, manipulation, and NDAs, she remained a haunted woman, both lit by purpose and scorched by memory. And in a rare piece of poetry released through her foundation's blog, she wrote, "They made me America's daughter, but never let me be someone's little girl. Malcolm was the only one who saw that. Now I'm raising myself from the rubble." And just when the world thought the storm had passed, just when Keshia Knight Pulliam began to stitch the torn edges of her spirit back together with court petitions, advocacy work, and the soft silence of long overdue peace, a new tremor shattered that fragile calm. Because buried deep in Malcolm's estate, beneath floorboards of his now abandoned Atlanta brownstone, inside a locked steel box scorched from a failed house fire that investigators had quietly called accidental, was the thing no one expected to find. A backup burner phone, still charged, still intact, still blinking with a single audio message saved under the title, "If They Kill Me." And when Keshia heard the playback for the first time, it wasn't just the quiver in Malcolm's voice that broke her. It was the names. Real names. Living names. Hollywood titans and studio heads and beloved showrunners still receiving awards for lifetime achievement. Men and women who had once patted Rudy Huxtable's head on set while signing settlement checks behind closed doors. And as Malcolm's voice detailed years of hush money, forged therapy documents, blackmail threats against child actors' families, and one horrifying Christmas Eve story where he found a sobbing 9-year-old Keshia locked in a wardrobe after discipline coaching, the world realized that the final cut was only the prelude. This message, this chilling whisper from beyond the grave, was the nuclear core of it all. The fuse that could finally implode the very industry that profited from Malcolm's image while draining his soul. And Keshia, holding that phone like it contained his heartbeat, knew there was no way to bury this, not this time. Within weeks, the DA's office reopened the inquiry, not into Malcolm's death, but into the system that orchestrated it. A sprawling web of non-disclosure agreements, offshore accounts, shell corporations named after sitcom episodes, and a trail of coerced silence so airtight it made the Weinstein case look amateur. And while lawyers scrambled, execs lawyered up, and old sitcom stars began fleeing into convenient rehab sabbaticals, the public saw through the PR smog for what it was: fear, not remorse. Fear that their favorite TV dad might have been complicit. Fear that their Sunday night family shows were built on Saturday night sacrifices. Fear that the face of 1980s black excellence might have been a mask for something far more sinister. And standing at the eye of that hurricane was Keshia, now armed not just with grief, but with evidence. Real, damning, irrefutable evidence. And with the help of a no-nonsense, whistleblower-hardened attorney named Gloria Rosenthal, she filed a class action suit so sweeping it named 14 executives, 3 major networks, 2 syndication platforms, and 1 dead icon's estate for crimes ranging from obstruction of justice to child endangerment, and the media called it what it was: the Theo trials. But court was no sanctuary, it was war. And the defense came loaded: character assassinations, doctored footage, expert witnesses claiming Malcolm suffered from delusions, and even a resurrected script supervisor who swore under oath that Keshia always had a vivid imagination and liked to play victim. But then came the bombshell. A retired prop assistant, long presumed dead, emerged from hiding in Panama and testified via video that not only did he witness several coercive incidents, but he once delivered a handwritten note from 10-year-old Keshia to Malcolm, a note she wrote while hiding in a studio trailer after refusing to do a private rehearsal with a guest director. And that note, scanned, authenticated, and read aloud in court, shook the room. "I'm scared. They say if I cry, I won't get a Christmas bonus. Please tell them you saw me. Please tell somebody I'm not lying." The courtroom went silent. The public went feral. And the empire began to rot from the inside. A-list stars began issuing vague apologies. Veteran producers deleted social media, networks quietly pulled episodes, and talk show hosts who once mocked Malcolm's mental breakdowns now wore somber black and spoke of him with reverence, but Keshia saw through it all. And when a former studio head offered a private settlement of $70 million to dissolve the case, she famously responded by sliding the offer letter into a shredder on livestream